I've lived alone for the last 3 years, and I've never had a problem with it. My neighborhood is quiet, the kind of place where people still wave when they drive by, and the loudest thing at night is usually the old oak tree tapping the window when the wind picks up. But there was one night, one single night, that made me realize how quickly a normal, harmless evening can turn into something you never forget. It started around 11:20 p.m. I had just finished a late shift and crashed onto the couch with a bowl of leftover pasta. The house felt unusually still, not scary, just too quiet. I remember thinking it was strange that the fridge wasn't humming or that the heater wasn't kicking on like it usually did. Just silence. I put on a random show to drown it out, but halfway through the episode, I heard it. A sound that didn't belong to any house settling or any pipe expanding. A footstep. Upstairs. Slow, heavy, deliberate. At first I froze, then I muted the TV and waited, convincing myself I was tired and imagining things. 5 seconds passed, then another footstep, and this time it was closer. My stomach dropped. Nobody had a key to my place, no one was visiting, and I knew I had locked the doors. For a moment I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the cat from next door slipped inside earlier. No, it was too heavy for that. I stood up slowly, my breath caught somewhere halfway up my throat. I could feel the pressure of the silence, like the whole house was holding its breath with me. Another step, closer, right above the living room. It felt like whoever or whatever was upstairs had stopped moving the second I stopped moving, almost like they were listening to me too. I reached for my phone, but my hands were shaking so badly that I dropped it onto the couch cushion. The tiny sound it made felt deafening in the quiet house. And then, from upstairs, a soft, dragging sound, as if someone shifted their weight and turned toward the staircase. That's when I knew I was not imagining this. Someone was in my house, and they were coming down. I backed away from the bottom of the stairs, every instinct in my body firing at once. My legs felt weak, like they weren't fully connected to me anymore. The house had gone so quiet that I could hear my own pulse thudding inside my ears. I kept staring at the top of the staircase, waiting, hoping that I was wrong. Then the sound came again, a single step, not rushed, not hesitant, just measured, like whoever was up there wanted me to hear them. I swallowed hard, and my throat felt painfully dry. I thought about running out the front door, but the moment I even pictured moving, I heard another step, closer to the stairs, heavier. Whoever was inside my home wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. They wanted me frozen. I reached out, slow and quiet, grabbing one of the kitchen knives from the counter without taking my eyes off the staircase. The handle felt cold and useless in my shaking hands. I wasn't even sure I could defend myself if it came to that. The next sound wasn't a step. It was a low wooden creak, the old banister at the top of the stairs shifting under weight. They were standing at the edge, right above me, listening. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what they wanted. I managed to unlock my phone screen, planning to dial 911, but before my thumb could move, the silence shattered. The upstairs hallway light flicked on. I didn't turn it on, and there was no timer. The bulb glowed weakly, casting a yellowish, sick-looking color down the staircase. Then I heard a voice, not loud, not aggressive, a man's voice, calm, steady, almost casual. I didn't think you'd be home yet." My whole body locked, my breath caught, my vision tunneled around the staircase. He said it like he knew me, like he'd been waiting. Slowly, a foot appeared at the top step, a man's shoe, worn, muddy, unfamiliar. Then another, and then he started coming down. One step, pause, another step, pause, deliberate, methodical, like he was enjoying every second of my fear. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, and then, about halfway down the stairs, he stopped. He leaned slightly forward, just enough that the light from the hallway outlined his silhouette, but I still couldn't see his face. He whispered, "You shouldn't live alone."
His voice didn't echo. It didn't rise or fall. It just sank into the room like something thick and poisonous. My grip tightened around the knife, but my hand was trembling so violently that the blade kept tapping against my leg. I didn't want him to hear how scared I was, but he already knew. He stayed on that middle step, his head slightly tilted, as if he were studying me in the dim light. Then he did something I will never forget. He inhaled, slow, deep, and let out a soft sigh, like he was relieved to see me terrified. My knees almost gave out. I forced myself to speak, though my voice came out barely audible. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he took another step down. My instinct screamed to run, but I was afraid that if I turned my back, he'd rush me, so I kept backing up toward the kitchen, step by unsteady step. He took another step. We were maybe 10 feet apart now. Then he spoke again, a whisper that somehow felt too close. "I've been in this house before." My blood ran cold. I felt the back of my heel bump against a cabinet. I had nowhere else to go. "What do you want?" I managed. He shifted his weight slightly, like someone preparing to move quickly, but he didn't come down the last steps. Instead, he lifted one hand, slowly, and pointed toward the hallway behind me. I didn't want to look. Every instinct told me not to. He whispered, "You leave your back door unlocked most nights." A chill crawled across my entire body. I always locked that door, every night, without fail. But that night, coming home late, exhausted, I hadn't checked. He must have known, or he had been watching. I flicked a glance toward the back hallway, terrified he wasn't alone, terrified someone else might be behind me. He chuckled softly, low and awful. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, and then, after a small pause, "Not tonight." Before I could process what he meant, he turned, casually, effortlessly, and began walking back up the stairs. I stared in disbelief as he disappeared around the corner, his footsteps steady, unbothered, confident, like he owned the place. I didn't chase, I didn't move. Then I heard it, a window sliding open, upstairs, followed by nothing, silence. I finally snapped out of shock and stumbled to the front door, bursting outside into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I reached my neighbor's house and banged on the door like my life depended on it. The police searched the house, every room, every closet, every crawl space. He was gone. But they did find one thing. In the upstairs hallway, right next to the window he escaped through, a folded piece of paper. On it, in messy handwriting, were 5 words: "You won't be alone forever." The police stayed for almost 2 hours after that, asking the same questions from different angles, trying to figure out how someone could have been inside my home long enough to wander around upstairs. watch me from above, and walk down the stairs like he had all the time in the world. They found no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no footprints, nothing disturbed except the open window upstairs. It was like he drifted in and drifted out, leaving only the note behind, almost like that was the real point of the whole thing. Before they left, one of the officers pulled me aside. Older guy, gray hair, tired eyes. He said, "If he said he's been inside your house before, you should take that seriously." I didn't sleep in the house that night, or the next night. In fact, it took me 8 days before I could walk back inside without feeling like someone was watching me. When I finally did, everything looked normal, perfectly normal, but I couldn't shake this suffocating feeling that something was off, like the silence had weight again. So I bought new locks, installed cameras, motion sensors, alarms, every security upgrade I could think of. For a while it helped. I felt safer, almost stupid for how terrified I'd been. Until 3 weeks later. It was a Thursday night. Cold, windy, nothing unusual. I got home from work, turned on the living room lights, and tossed my keys on the counter like always. Then, out of habit, I checked the camera notifications on my phone. There was a motion alert from the upstairs hallway, time-stamped 4:17 p.m., 4 hours before I got home. My stomach twisted. I opened the clip. The hallway was dim, only a sliver of natural light bleeding in from the window. The camera pointed toward the top of the stairs. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, at the edge of the frame, just before the feed timed out, a shadow moved. Not quickly, not like someone running. It moved the way he had moved down the stairs that night. Slow, deliberate, like it wanted to be seen. I froze, staring at the screen, barely breathing. Then I noticed something else. In the corner of the video, the camera caught a glimpse of the carpet. The police had dusted for prints the night he broke in. Some of that powder was still trapped deep in the fibers, barely visible. But when the shadow passed, the powder shifted, compressed, like a foot had stepped on it. My whole body went numb. If he got in before, even after I changed everything, if he was inside again, if he was comfortable enough to walk right past a camera, then I hadn't scared him away. I hadn't stopped anything. All I had done was prove to him that he could come and go whenever he wanted. And the worst part? The video ended with a small sound, barely audible, almost lost under the grain. A whisper. A calm, steady breath, followed by a man's voice, close, too close to the camera. "Told you, you won't be alone." I live on a quiet street at the edge of a small town. One of those places where nothing ever happens, and people leave their porch lights on more out of habit than necessity. I've always liked the calm here. Nights are silent, the kind of silent where you can hear your own heartbeat if you stand still long enough. But silence can turn on you. Sometimes it makes the smallest sound feel 10 times louder. That's what happened the night the woman first knocked on my door. It was a little after midnight. I was in bed scrolling through my phone, half asleep, when I heard it. Slow, uneven, like each one took effort. At first, I wasn't even sure it came from my door. I thought maybe it was part of a dream or something from a video I'd been watching. But then it came again. 3 knocks, spaced out, too deliberate to be random. I sat up. My room was dark except for the faint glow of the screen. Nobody ever shows up at my place this late. I tried to listen for any other sound, a voice, footsteps, maybe someone driving away. but there was nothing. I got out of bed and walked to the living room. The knock came again, softer this time, almost like the person was leaning their head against the door. I checked the peephole. At first, I didn't see anything, just darkness and the yellow blur of my porch light struggling against the night. Then she stepped forward. A woman, maybe in her 40s, hair messy, clothes wrinkled, eyes wide and glassy like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't look at the peephole. She just stared at the door itself, like she was reading something on it. I hesitated, unsure whether to speak or stay quiet. That's when she whispered, "I think someone followed me here." Her voice wasn't scared, it wasn't shaking, it was flat, dull, almost emotionless. Something about that bothered me more than if she had been crying. I didn't open the door. Instead, I spoke through it. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head slowly. "Can you please just let me in for a minute?" I felt a knot in my stomach. People don't ask strangers that at midnight, not in this town, not on this street. I reached for my phone to call the police, just in case, but the moment I lifted it, she leaned closer to the door. Her voice dropped to a whisper I could barely hear. "He's standing right behind you." My heart lurched. I spun around. Nothing. Nobody. When I turned back to the peephole, she was gone. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my palms. I kept staring through the peephole, waiting for her face to slide back into view. But the porch was empty, completely empty. No footsteps, not running, not even the sound of gravel shifting. Just silence. I flicked on the porch light to get a better look. Still nothing. There was no way she disappeared that fast, not without me hearing something. I checked the side window, my porch, the walkway, the street. All empty. I waited a few seconds before locking the deadbolt again, even though it was already locked. Something about the motion made me feel slightly safer. Then a thought hit me. If someone had followed her, where were they now? I stepped back, suddenly hyper-aware of every shadow in the room. The dark corners felt deeper than usual, like the shapes inside them were holding their breath, waiting for me to look away. I checked the hallway, bathroom, closet, kitchen. Nothing. Eventually, I made my way back to the living room, peeking out the front window one more time. The street was dead still. Not even a breeze moved. After a minute or two, I tried to convince myself she was just confused, maybe mentally ill, maybe lost. That explanation made more sense than anything else. I went back to my room, though I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. I lay down and pulled the blankets up to my chest, phone in hand, just in case. For a while, nothing happened. Then, but this time, the sound didn't come from the front door. It came from the back. I sat up so fast the mattress squeaked. 3 slow knocks again, identical cadence, almost like she wanted to be sure I recognized them. I slipped out of bed and moved through the house as quietly as possible, trying not to let the floorboards creak. The back door had no peephole, so I had to approach from the side window first. I leaned just enough to see the porch. My stomach tightened. The woman was standing there, but she was facing away from the door, staring into the woods behind my property. Her posture was wrong, too rigid, too still. I almost called out to her, but then I realized something that made my blood run cold. Her hair wasn't moving, not even a strand, yet the trees around her were swaying slightly in the breeze. She was completely motionless. Then, without turning around, she spoke in that same drained voice as before. "He followed me here. I told you." But the way she said it, flat, rehearsed,
didn't sound like she was talking to me. It sounded like she was repeating it, like she'd said it many times before. Maybe to someone else, maybe to herself, maybe to whoever she claimed was following her. I stepped back from the window. My hands were trembling now. And then she slowly lifted her arm and pointed at the dark line of trees behind the house. She whispered, "He's waiting."
I didn't want to look into the woods. Every instinct told me not to. But fear has a way of pulling you toward the very thing you're trying to avoid. Slowly, I shifted my gaze past the woman's rigid silhouette and toward the tree line. At first, I saw nothing, just darkness and the slight movement of branches bending in the wind. Then, one detail stood out, something that didn't match the rhythm of the trees. A shape, still, too still. It wasn't hiding, it wasn't crouched or ducking behind anything. It was standing, dead center between two trees, facing the house. A tall figure, unmoving, almost like a cutout placed in the forest. No flashlight, no phone light, no visible features, just a dark, solid shape. My chest tightened, and it felt like my lungs forgot how to work. I blinked hard, thinking maybe it was my eyes playing tricks on me. But when I opened them again, the figure was closer. Not by much, just a few feet forward, but enough to know it had moved without making a sound. I stumbled backward from the window, knocking into the counter. My heartbeat thudded so loud I could barely hear anything else. Then the woman spoke again, same flat tone, same empty voice. "He doesn't like when people watch him." She still hadn't turned around. Her posture didn't change. Her breathing didn't change. It was like she was trapped in that stance. I looked through the window again. The figure was gone. A cold wave ran through me. I held my breath, waiting for movement, any sign of where he had gone. The woods looked normal again. Too normal. Then, the woman's hand was still pointing toward the trees. She hadn't knocked. The sound was coming from her other side, toward the corner of the house. My mind raced. Had he circled around? Had he split off from the woods? I backed up toward the hallway, knife still in my hand, my throat tightening with fear. Another set of knocks, this time on the side window. 3 slow taps, the same rhythm, the same deliberate, patient cadence. The woman finally turned her head slightly, just enough for me to see the corner of her face through the glass. Her eyes were wider now, not scared, almost excited. In a whisper that sounded more like a warning than fear, she said, "Don't look at him." But it was already too late. I could see the faint reflection of something in the glass. A tall shape, standing inches from the side of my house. I froze, staring at the window, unable to move or breathe. The reflection was faint, barely a silhouette, but unmistakably human. Tall, broad-shouldered, close enough that if the glass weren't there, I could have reached out and touched him. I backed away, slow and careful, trying not to make a sound. Just as I took my second step, the knocking stopped. Silence. I held my breath, waiting, hoping that the shadow would move away. But then I heard something far worse. Breathing, slow, heavy, right on the other side of the wall. I clamped a hand over my mouth, terrified he could hear the way my breathing was spiraling out of control. Every sound in the house seemed impossibly loud now. My heartbeat, the refrigerator hum, the soft creak of the floor under my feet.
The woman was still outside, facing the woods, pointing at nothing. She hadn't turned fully around. She hadn't run. She hadn't moved at all. What was she doing out there? What had she brought to my home? Another soft tap, but this time it wasn't a knock. It sounded like someone dragging their fingernails along the siding, tracing the outline of the house. The sound traveled from the side window toward the back door. He was circling, hunting. I ducked behind the kitchen island, crouched low, trying to make myself as small and silent as possible. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to do something, but fear had pinned me in place. Then the woman whispered again, this time louder, more urgent. "He's close." My heart stopped. Her voice had changed, not flat, not monotone. This time, she sounded afraid. The scraping stopped. For a moment, the entire world went still. Then, from the back porch, a soft metallic rattle. The doorknob. He was trying it, turning it, testing it. Slow, steady pressure. I felt my stomach drop when I realized I had locked the door, but the deadbolt was old, loose, unreliable. I always meant to replace it. I heard him shift his weight. The wood creaked. The knob jerked harder. Then the woman said something that chilled me more than anything else that night. "He doesn't break in. He waits until you open something." My throat tightened. I didn't understand. Open something? A door? A window? No. My eyes widened. The curtains, the blinds, the peephole, anything that let me look at him. I realized with dawning horror that I had made the one mistake she warned me about. I had looked straight at him in the woods. That's when the doorknob stopped moving. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, from the other side of the door, low and whisper soft, "He sees you." "I see you." My entire body went cold. The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was calm. Too calm, like the words were meant only for me, spoken inches away through a thin sheet of wood. I pressed my back against the cabinet, gripping the knife so tightly my knuckles ached. My breath came in shallow gasps, and every instinct screamed at me not to move, not to make a sound, not to acknowledge that I heard him. For several long seconds, the house was silent. No scraping, no footsteps, no knocks, just that lingering sense that someone was standing on the other side of the door, listening to the tremor in my breathing. Then, suddenly, bang! The entire door jolted in its frame, wood cracking under the force. I nearly dropped the knife. My heart slammed against my ribs. Another bang, harder this time. The deadbolt rattled violently. Dust shook loose from the top of the frame. I scrambled backward, knocking over a chair as I crawled across the floor. I barely made it behind the living room couch when everything went still again. 1 second, 2, 3. Then the woman's voice drifted through the back window. Soft, broken, unsteady. It was the first time she sounded like an actual human being that night. "Please, please don't let him in." I peeked over the couch just enough to see her silhouette through the glass. She was shaking now, her shoulders rising and falling erratically. Her earlier stiffness was gone, like whatever control she'd been under was slipping. But something else was wrong.
She wasn't looking at the woods anymore. She was looking directly at my house, at the back door. Then, not knocking, he was running his fingers along the window pane now. I ducked again, clutching my phone. My hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped it, but I managed to unlock it and dial 911. The moment the call connected, the woman's voice broke into a sharp, panicked cry. "He's moving!" I heard footsteps, fast ones, tearing across the back porch. I braced myself, knife up, waiting for the door to explode inward. But instead, the footsteps passed the door, rushed along the siding, then faded into the distance, vanishing into the woods behind my house. The dispatcher was talking, asking me questions, but all I could do was stare at the back window, half expecting his face to appear in the glass at any moment. It never did. By the time the police arrived, the woman was gone too. They searched the yard, the woods, the porch. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, like neither of them had ever been there. The officers took my statement, promised to patrol the area, told me to lock my doors and go somewhere safe for the night. I stayed with a friend for a week before I had the courage to return home. By then, the fear had dulled into something almost manageable. Just a bad memory I hoped would fade with time. But the first night back, as I walked around checking windows and locks, I noticed something on the outside of the house near the back door. A small mark on the siding, a thin, deliberate line, like someone had traced a fingertip down the wall, scratching lightly. I bent closer. There were 3 of them, perfectly spaced. The same rhythm as the knocks, and carved beneath them, so faint I almost missed it, were 2 words etched into the paint. Still here.
I live at the end of a dead-end road, a quiet little strip of cracked asphalt surrounded by pine trees and old fences. Only 4 houses sit on this road, and all of us keep to ourselves. It's peaceful, isolated, but peaceful. At least, it used to be. The night everything changed started off like any normal Thursday. I had gotten home from work around 9 p.m., reheated leftovers, and sat down to watch a movie. It was raining. Steady, cold rain that made the whole house feel quieter than usual. Around 10:30, the power flickered. Just once. Then again. Then it went out completely. The house fell into darkness. I grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and checked the breaker, but nothing seemed wrong. The entire neighborhood was dark too. Only the rain made any noise. It didn't bother me much. Power outages aren't uncommon here during storms. So I lit a candle and sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone until the battery dipped low. The rain softened after a while, turning into a faint drizzle, tapping gently against the windows. That's when I heard it. Not thunder, not wind, not rain. A soft gritting sound, like wet shoes stepping on gravel. At first, I thought maybe it was an animal wandering near the house, but the steps were too heavy, too slow, and too evenly spaced. I turned off my phone screen and sat completely still. More footsteps, getting closer. I moved to the window beside the front door and pulled the curtain back just enough to peek outside. My breath caught in my throat. There was a man standing at the very end of my driveway, not moving, not walking, just standing, facing my house.
He wasn't holding a flashlight. He wasn't looking around. He wasn't calling out for help. He was just there, completely still. The rain made it hard to see, but I could make out the shape of him, a tall figure, soaked, head slightly tilted downward like he was staring at the gravel. He didn't look up, not once. For a moment, I wondered if he needed help. Maybe he had gotten lost in the storm, but something about the way he stood there made my stomach twist. People who need help don't stand perfectly still in the dark. I watched him for nearly a full minute. He didn't move, not even a shift of weight. Then, slowly, so slowly it barely looked intentional, his head lifted, not all the way, just enough that I could see the faint outline of his face in the dim light of my dying porch bulb. No expression, no urgency, just blank. He wasn't looking at the house. He was looking directly at me. I let go of the curtain so fast it slapped against the wall. For a moment, everything went still again, until he started walking. Up the driveway, straight toward my house. The sound of his footsteps on the gravel hit me harder than the sight of him standing there. Slow, heavy, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world. I backed away from the window, pressing myself against the wall, trying to control my breathing. Every few seconds, I heard another crunch of gravel, each one getting a little closer. I killed the flashlight. The house plunged into complete darkness. For a moment, the only sound was the slow rhythm of his steps. Then, even that stopped. I didn't dare look, didn't dare move. I crept toward the front door, careful not to let the floorboards creak. My mind raced through possibilities, a lost hiker, someone drunk, someone confused, but nothing fit the way he moved, the way he watched. When I reached the door, I peeked through the peephole. What I saw made my stomach drop. He was standing halfway up the driveway now, closer than before, motionless again. But his head was tilted slightly upward, just enough that the porch light caught part of his face. His eyes were open, wide, unblinking, fixed on the front of my house. And he was smiling. Not a big smile, just a slight curl of the mouth, wrong, tense, like the expression didn't belong on his face. I stepped back from the door, hard. My heel hit the end table, and something rattled loudly on top of it. The noise echoed in the dark. Immediately, he started walking again, this time faster. I held my breath and moved backward into the living room, trying not to make another sound. The rain outside had almost stopped, making the crunching of his footsteps even clearer. Then they stopped again. I forced myself to peek through the curtain, just a sliver. He was at the very edge of my front yard now, feet inches from the first step of the porch, head still tilted up, eyes locked onto the window, onto me, even through the tiny gap in the curtain. He knew exactly where I was standing. I shut the curtain and stumbled backward into the hallway, heart pounding so hard it felt like it was shaking my whole chest. That's when I heard it. A single soft sound, barely audible on the porch, then another. He wasn't knocking. He was dragging his fingers lightly along the metal railing, tracing it, almost like he was trying to find the edges of the house in the dark. My phone buzzed in my pocket, nearly making me scream. Battery at 4%. No service. Of course. I backed deeper into the hallway, muscles shaking so badly it hurt to stay upright. I considered hiding in the bathroom, but the window in there was too small and too old, and I hated the idea of being trapped. The tapping continued, slow, rhythmic, moving along the railing, toward the wooden steps. Then, the first step of the porch sagged under his weight. He was climbing, walking toward the front door. The house vibrated with each careful footfall. One step, then another, then he stopped, right in front of the door. Silence. Total silence. I clamped my mouth over my mouth and waited, legs shaking, every cell in my body screaming to run. Then a new sound made my blood run cold. He slid something under the front door. Paper. A small sheet. Slowly, deliberately, like he wanted me to see it. I stared at the thin slip of paper now resting on the floor just inside the doorframe. It was perfectly centered, like he had taken his time aligning it. I didn't dare reach for it. I stood frozen, listening to the faint sound of his breath on the other side of the door. Long, slow breaths, like he was calming himself or savoring something. Then he shifted his weight on the porch. My entire body tensed. Another soft sound followed. He was dragging his fingernail across the door itself, tracing along the edges, slow and deliberate. I swallowed hard, forcing my feet to move. My instincts screamed to run, but some part of me needed to know what was on that paper, needed to understand what he wanted. I crouched down, moving as silently as possible. My fingers trembled as I pinched the edge of the paper and pulled it closer. One sentence, written in shaky, uneven handwriting. You left your bedroom light on. I felt something inside me twist. I had been in the bedroom earlier, with the power out, no lights on. I looked up at the ceiling. The bedroom overhead was dark. Every room in the house was dark. What does that mean? I whispered. As if answering me, the man on the porch let out a low, soft laugh, barely audible, more like an exhale than actual amusement. Then, on the door, once, not knocking, just a signal, a message. I staggered back, heart pounding in my ears. I checked the windows, every single one, looking for a silhouette, a shadow, anything indicating he'd moved. Nothing. Then I realized something terrifying. I no longer heard him breathing. The porch was silent. I crept toward the side window and pulled the curtain back a fraction of an inch. The porch was empty. The steps were empty. The driveway was empty. He was gone. Just gone. No footsteps leading away, no movement, nothing but wet gravel and the quiet drip of rain from the gutters. I backed away from the window, shaking. How did he leave so quietly? How did he disappear that fast? My mind raced. Maybe he was hiding somewhere. Maybe he hadn't left at all. I didn't want to believe that thought. I turned to go to the kitchen, to grab a knife, to grab anything. The unmistakable sound of a floorboard inside the house, somewhere down the hallway. I froze mid-step. Another creak. Closer. The paper in my hand crumpled as my hand clenched involuntarily. Then a third creak, right outside my bedroom. I hadn't imagined it. I wasn't mistaken. Someone was inside the house. I reached for the nearest object I could use as a weapon, a heavy candle holder, my pulse thundering as I backed slowly toward the front door. That's when my phone vibrated weakly.
2% battery. A single notification appeared on the screen. Motion detected. Bedroom. I felt the room tilt. My legs nearly gave out. I tapped the notification, hands trembling so violently I could barely hold the phone. The camera feed opened. The bedroom was dark, still, empty. Then, the door to the bedroom slowly swung open, and someone stepped into frame. A tall silhouette, soaked clothes, head tilted, same posture as the man in the driveway, only now he was inside my home. And as he stepped forward, the camera captured something else. He was holding something in his hand, something small, something familiar. My bedroom lamp remote, the one I could never find earlier, the one that had gone missing days ago, right before the power outage. He raised the remote toward the camera like he wanted to show me. Then he clicked it. The bedroom light turned on. Bright, instant, blinding. My phone buzzed again. A new message on the camera feed. Bedroom light on. I realized the note he slid under my door wasn't a warning. It wasn't a message. It was a statement of fact.
He had been inside my house long before tonight.
My hands went numb. The phone nearly slipped from my fingers as I stared at the bright, overexposed image of my own bedroom. The light he had just turned on from inside my house. I backed away from the hallway, every muscle in my body screaming to run, but refusing to move. The candle holder shook violently in my grip. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears, drowning out everything else, until the next sound cut through it like a blade. Footsteps. Soft, measured, inside the house. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was walking, slowly, like he wanted me to hear every step. One step deeper into the hallway. Another, closer. My phone buzzed again, vibrating weakly in my trembling hand. Motion detected. Hallway. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see him, but fear dragged my eyes back to the screen anyway. The motion camera switched to the hallway feed. A tall figure stood halfway down the hall, his silhouette outlined by the glowing rectangle of the bedroom behind him. He wasn't facing the camera. He was facing me, directly, his head tilted to the same unnatural angle I'd seen outside in the driveway. His clothes dripped water onto the hardwood, forming a small, growing pool beneath his feet. Then he did something that made my lungs seize. He lifted his arm, slowly, and held up a small object. My bedroom key. The spare one I kept in my nightstand drawer, the one that had gone missing a month ago. He turned it over in his hand, letting the camera catch the shine of the metal, almost like he was showing me how long he'd had it. And then he tapped the key once against the wall, the same slow rhythm he'd used on the porch railing. I backed up until I hit the far wall, gripping the candle holder like my life depended on it. The man took one slow step forward, then another. My phone buzzed again. 1% battery. The screen dimmed slightly. The camera feed flickered, but before it cut out, I saw something that sent a wave of pure terror through my entire body. He smiled. A tiny, stiff curl of his lips, the exact same smile I'd seen in the driveway. And then the feed went black. My phone died. The house went silent, but not empty. Not anymore. I could hear him, breathing, in the hallway, close, too close. A slow inhale, a slow exhale, steady, patient, then the sound of his wet shoe shifting against the floor. Another step. He was coming. I pressed myself against the far wall, choking on my own breath, gripping the candle holder until my fingers burned. I stared into the darkness of the hallway, begging my eyes to adjust, but I saw nothing, only the sound. He stopped just outside the living room, so close I could hear the faint drip of rainwater falling from his jacket onto the floor. Then, in the darkness, his whisper, "You shouldn't hide from someone who already lives here."
His whisper felt close enough to touch. Too close. I slid sideways along the wall, trying to put even a few more inches between us. I didn't dare look directly into the darkness where his voice came from. Every instinct screamed that if I made eye contact, something worse would happen. I tightened my grip on the candle holder and forced myself to speak, my voice cracking, barely holding together. "Get out of my house!" A beat of silence. Then a quiet, amused inhale. "Your house." He shifted his weight, the floor groaning under his soaked shoes. The faint sound of dripping water filled the dark hallway again. Slow, rhythmic drops hitting the hardwood. Like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Then he whispered, softer this time. "I chose this place long before you did." The words hit me like ice water. I didn't understand, didn't want to understand, but the way he said long before made my skin crawl. I felt him move again, a single step, closer, too close. I raised the candle holder blindly, pulse racing, adrenaline shaking through my arms. But he didn't rush me. He didn't grab me. He didn't touch me at all. Instead, he exhaled, slow, regretful, almost disappointed. "You ruined it by seeing me." That sentence hollowed me out. I didn't breathe, couldn't breathe. He continued, "Now I can't stay. Not tonight." My lungs burned as I backed toward the front door, barely feeling the floor beneath my feet. I tugged the chain lock free with shaking fingers. Behind me, a faint sound of fabric moving, a shift of weight, a step turning away. He was leaving. I didn't turn around, didn't look. I just grabbed the doorknob, twisted it, and threw myself outside into the cold night air. I ran across the yard barefoot, gravel slicing into my feet. I didn't stop running until I reached the neighbor's porch light, pounding on the door until my vision blurred and my body nearly collapsed. They let me in, confused, half asleep, trying to calm me down as they called the police. But by the time officers searched my house, he was gone. No wet footprints, no signs of entry. No forced locks, nothing missing, nothing broken. Like he had never existed. Except one thing was different. When the police checked my bedroom, they found the lamp remote placed perfectly at the center of my pillow, and on the back of it, written in tiny, shaky letters, were 4 words: "I'll come back soon." For days, I couldn't get myself to step inside the house again. When I finally did, I replaced every lock, installed cameras, new lights, new deadbolts, everything. But even now, weeks later, sometimes, usually around the same time the rain starts, I hear it again, soft, measured. Footsteps on the gravel at the end of my driveway, exactly where he stood the first night. And every time I look, the driveway is empty, but the gravel is disturbed, fresh footprints leading halfway toward the house, and then stopping, right where the porch light begins to reach, like he's still standing there, just outside the glow, waiting for the night I make the mistake of looking directly at him again.